Welcome back to the Bulldog broadcast on the Field of 68 Media Network. I'm your host, Dan Dickow, former Zag. Brought to the conversation today, another former Zag, somebody I got to know during my early years in the NBA playing for the Atlanta Hawks while he was living there. He was a Zag around the time of John Stockton, arrived on campus in 1982, graduated in 87, had a couple stints as a pro all around the world, was a tremendous player himself. Looking forward to hearing his perspective on the Zags and just how amazing the ride this program has been on. So sorry for the long intro. Let's get to it. Mike Champion. Mike, how are you doing?
Doing great, Dan. How are you? It's good to see you.
Yeah, unfortunately for us, it's been too long since we've seen each other. I know you were in Spokane a couple years ago and we connected, for lunch. But,
Yeah.
Zags love to support other Zags, and you've been a huge supporter of the program ever since you've left. When you look at the program now, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Greatness. When I think about the Zags program over the years and what's been built there, I think that's probably the first word that comes to mind. The second is humility. And those two don't often go hand in hand. But if you think about the Zag program, they've built a legacy that is hard to duplicate. And they've done so with enough humility, true confidence. But one of the things that I've always loved about Gonzaga is the character of the teams. And I think that's been the one thread that's been consistent from even before when I went to Gonzaga till now is the character of each of the teams.
Character of the teams and the people, as well as the players, as well as the coaches in the athletic department. I would agree with you wholeheartedly that people in that Gonzaga community have tremendous character. You played with somebody at Gonzaga that has tremendous character. I got to know him as soon as I got to campus. You were teammates with him for a year, and that's the great John Stockton. When you were playing with him, did you ever imagine he was going to be first ballot Hall of Famer, dream teamer, all-time great in the NBA?
I don't think even John would have guessed that that would have happened in his career. I think that, I've told the story, not so much to John, but maybe outside of John's circles, that I think the first time I played a pickup game at Gonzaga was, my senior year in high school. And it was open gym. And honestly, I did not know the guys on the team other than the guys that had sort of hosted me on my recruiting trip. And John wasn't one of those guys. And I think there were a few ball players or guys on the team that were in the open gym run. And, if you looked at John back then, you weren't sure, what his role on the team would have been. But I remember thinking, oh my gosh, that is the quickest guy I've ever been on the court with. And you would just see his greatness begin to come out little by little over a period of time until it was just undeniable. And, the thing about John is the thing about a lot of Zags was his work ethic and his ability to just work himself into becoming a great player. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened kind of day by day, week by week, year after year. And, John earned every accolade that he's ever received because that guy for 19 years in the league just got better and worked hard every offseason.
He definitely set the tone for guys in my era as well as the current team for work ethic and what it meant to truly work hard at it. And you could consider him a foundational piece of the program, but I think one of the two coaches that you played for doesn't get enough credit for it, and that would be Dan Fitzgerald. You also played for Jay Hillock, who coached John Stockton, but Dan Fitzgerald, to me, unfortunately, at times gets lost in the conversation about setting the foundation and the blueprint together. What are your thoughts on Dan Fitzgerald and what did he mean to you?
Well, I mean, for me personally, I love the guy because in many ways, there were tough years, maybe for me personally at Gonzaga, that don't need to be overblown, but just in terms of a mom passing away and trying to sort of refine that love for the game that I had when I was in high school. But Dan certainly brought that back for me. And he kind of did so just by, fundamentals of building a relationship with kids. I felt like he cared about his players a lot. I felt like he cared about the coaches on the team. I think he began to listen to his assistant coaches, especially when he brought in, Mark, Dan, and Leon, and others. And when he started listening to them, you started to see the program really grow by leaps and bounds. And I think part of that was he was willing to listen to their suggestions and upgrade his expectations in terms of players, and really begin to put a winning strategy together. I remember there were times where early in my career, we might have looked at a road trip and said, oh, let's go get 1 out of 2. Not necessarily the players, but the coaches were maybe thinking like that a little bit. And maybe that was, totally the right line of thinking for the talent that they had on the team. But in the end, I don't think that was ever the mentality that Gonzaga broached later in my career. I think we always were going after a win every single game. And then it went from going after the win to expecting the win. And, that's when the program really hit its stride under Fitzgerald, and then Dan, and obviously Mark has been, one of the greats of all time. So.
You mentioned going on the road, hoping to get a split, and a lot of programs do that. Gonzaga now, they're not just hoping to sweep the weekend; they're hoping to sweep the conference slate in the WCC, and they've done it a few times now.
Before we move on to the next topic, let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at BETRIVERS Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up with BETRIVERS yet, now's the time, because they are offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. With basketball season tipping off, get in on the action by going to betrivers.com today or by downloading the BETRIVERS iOS app. Must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
After your professional playing career, you end up relocating to the South in Atlanta, and that's where you and I became connected. You take yourself removed from the Pacific Northwest. You're in the South in Atlanta. You're seeing this culture of Gonzaga taking it to the next level now, Elite Eight, Sweet 16s. How much pride did you have in that, and how hard was it to describe to fellow Georgianites, if that's what they're called, just what was happening in the Pacific Northwest?
It's been amazing. So moved here in 97. And I remember when I was first here, and, someone would say, oh, you're, 6'9", 6'10", you must've played basketball. And I'd say, yeah, I played at a little school out West. And they'd ask where, and I'd say Gonzaga. And, they'd kind of shrug their shoulders. Maybe 2 or 3 years into that, they started, identifying it. And I think when you came here as a Hawk, it put Gonzaga on the map a little bit more in the Southeast, because then they could recognize a player from Gonzaga in their own backyard. And of course, everyone had heard of John Stockton. And if they were real basketball fans, they knew where he went to college for sure. But, you fast forward over the years, my sons, 3 of them, have only known Gonzaga as a powerhouse sort of team from the time they were in diapers when you knew them when they were here, all the way to today. And this is kind of funny, because last weekend I went to the store and I had a Gonzaga sweatshirt on, and I got stopped in the line buying my groceries, and the cashier had comments about how great a program Gonzaga was. There was an Arizona alum behind me who was talking about how happy they were that they got Tommy to Arizona and how great a program Gonzaga was, which was awesome. And then I walked out in the parking lot and got stopped again by another couple whose daughter had gone to Gonzaga. And I can guarantee that without the success of the program, the student body doesn't get as diverse as it probably is today without that name recognition. So hats off to the entire athletic department for doing that.
That's a couple amazing experiences and stories about, the impact that Gonzaga, has and the recognition that comes along with the name Gonzaga across the country. I think one of the things that's missed at times is some of the great players that came before this amazing stretch of the last 22 years or so in the NCAA tournament. You mentioned John Stockton. Everybody knows of him and his career, but there were a lot of other guys that were really good players, and you kind of bridged a lot of different teams. Is there one or two Gonzaga players from that mid 80s to late 80s stretch that you look at and say, maybe they wouldn't start on this current version of Gonzaga, but they would be a big time player in the rotation because of their skill set? They could shoot it, the intangibles that they bring.
Yeah, I mean, a number of players definitely come to mind. Jim McPhee and his older brother Bryce, I got to play with both of those guys. And obviously they're up the leaderboard as it relates to scores, but they could have scored on any team. And, Bryce wasn't around when there was a 3-point line, but he certainly would have had an even bigger impact on the game with that. There were some big guys that, people may not remember. There was a guy named Bill Dunlap who was my recruiting host. And Bill Dunlap was a 6'9", 245-pound guy that could run and had amazing footwork. And he may not have been Drew Timme, but in a high-low offense and something other than a 5 passes or layup flex offense, he probably would have put up some numbers that would have gotten some attention. And he was a good enough athlete to run the court. And a guy named Jason Van Noort might have been the best big athlete I had been around, and he had a knee injury his junior year that sidelined him. But he was a guy, I think we played Iowa back in the day, and he might have dunked on their entire team. I mean, he was unbelievable athletically. And people know about Jeff Condell. He was great. A guy named Doug Spradley was great. And then there was another guy named Tim Ruff, who was probably 6'10". His shoulders wouldn't fit on the screen because they would, go off the edge on either side. He was just very, very broad, and he could really, really play. And most of these guys, so many of the guys in my era got to go play overseas. They were really good players. But, in order to make it to the NBA, it takes a little extra, and, it was harder to make. And so there just weren't many guys that got an opportunity to make it in the NBA, but very, very good players from the 80s. And the list would go on and on. And the one thing I'll say about all of my teammates they were unbelievable guys. And I look at them now, and they're successful in business. They're successful in life. They're all super competitive. From having played against John, what that's like and what it's like on game point when you're in his gym. Everybody from that era has a little chip on their shoulder as it relates to winning. And, I think given, the environment and the offensive strategies of Gonzaga now, you would have seen a few of those guys make a bigger name for themselves than they even did back in the 80s, for sure.
Well, I love the fact that you threw out a lot of names, a couple that I had never heard or really known much about. Some guys I knew quite a bit about, the McPhees, Jeff Condell, another one who I knew about. But love the fact that you were able to kind of give some recognition to some of those guys that need to be recognized as some foundational pieces of Gonzaga basketball. Last question before I let you go, Mike. You live in Atlanta. The Final Four is in New Orleans this year. Can we expect to meet up for lunch if the Zags make the Final Four? And what's your prediction for this year?
So I've actually never been to a Final Four with Gonzaga, and I've told a few people this is the year that I am definitely going to be there. So I'd love to have lunch with you. I was just talking to a former teammate of mine, a guy named Dave Clement, and Dave is the guy that scored the winning basket against DePaul, which was probably the biggest win we had in the 80s. And he's going to be there. Other of my teammates are definitely going to be there. They're already, we're all knocking on wood because nobody wants to jinx the Final Four. But by the same token, we're all bought in and we want to be there. I think that the two losses that Gonzaga has on the books right now may actually help them in the long run. So I'm, being optimistic, but I'm thinking that this is a year that they make it back there. And this might be the year that they get all the way over the hump. I would love to see it, for Drew Timme. I'd love to see it for all the guys on the team. And I'd love to see it for the coaches that have put in so much hard work to get them there a couple of times and be really close and have them get over the hump.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you joining. Hopefully we can connect for lunch as mentioned in New Orleans, because that would mean Gonzaga is there. So thanks again for joining. Again, this is Dan Dickow for the Bulldog broadcast on the Field of 68 Media Network.